The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio with Lee Witting. Whether you're listening on TalkZone, by podcast, through the archives of our ad-free shows on our YouTube channel, or connected through the incredible content of our Facebook page. Our guest today, Travis Shreeve, grew up in the Salt Lake City area of Utah, part of a large, supportive Mormon family. Travis studied to become a CPA, married his wife Amy, and the couple looked forward to raising kids of their own. But when their daughter Whitney was born, they realized, even in the hospital, that something wasn't normal. It turned out Whitney and later her son, Vincent, suffered from an inability to digest certain fatty acids critical to development. Both children required feeding tubes, were unable to speak, and had very limited senses of hearing and sight. Despite the attention they required, the family loved and cared for them and grieved when Whitney died at 16 months and Vincent at 8 years. Happily, a genetic fix was possible, and the family went on to birth two normal and happy sets of twins. But then in 2021, another potential disaster struck. Travis had not yet been vaccinated when he was struck down by COVID. When he passed out at home, he was rushed to the hospital by ambulance, where a remarkable encounter with the other side was about to take place. Travis, welcome to NDE Radio.
Thanks, Lee. Good to be here.
Did I summarize your life sufficiently?
Very, very well.
All right. The first half of your life. You're now 41, so you're only halfway there. Travis, it seemed things began to go south in your mind when the doctors decided to intubate you at the hospital. Tell us, give us the details of what was going on at that moment.
Yeah, I was affected so badly by COVID. That morning we had called for the ambulance to come, and I don't remember much after that. But in fact, my family gives a lot of the details of how worried they were. My father was there at the same time as my wife, and although I don't remember a lot of the initial feelings, he told my wife to go home and prepare the kids that I was dying. So,
oh. Wow. And you felt like you were dying too, I guess. You've said that it made you terribly anxious to be intubated, as I recall.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which is understandable. I mean, anything going down your throat like that is pretty rough.
Absolutely. And circumstances, not getting enough air and the drugs, whatever it may be, really put my mind in a bad place. I understood. I knew what I knew what it was to be intubated. I knew about the ventilators, and particularly with COVID, it was maybe a newer concept to me, but I knew it. And yet when I was there, I didn't understand it. And so there was a real not being really aware when they inserted that to kind of wake up and have that was terrifying. It was a terrifying thing, coupled with an inability to breathe was just really scary.
Now it's an interesting story, especially because you go through a dark place to get to a very beautiful place. And the question is, I guess, whether these are hallucinations, but it seems like they were not, that you heard people telling you that they were going to kill you. And that certainly wasn't the hospital staff.
Right. Yeah, there was definitely, there was something, there was, it really felt like there was a force trying to get me to give up. And whether that was at that point, whether that was my own mind or some dark force really coming at me, there was a power there. And And while I had those experiences, those specific dark experiences, it was all centered there in the hospital room, and it was just terrifying. It was just terrifying anxiety, and just the way that time moved was particularly scary.
Mm. There were times in the hospital when I was chaplain that it seemed like there were souls gathered there. And one of the nurses I knew, who was pretty clairvoyant, said she saw ghosts in the hospital. And it occurred to me that maybe these were like fallen souls. I mean, especially during that time of COVID, when there were so many people dying from this disease, that they might come after you. I think you said at one point that they seemed like not like demons or anything, but more like people who'd been put in a small place, and this was giving them some sort of pleasure, that they were giggling at the thought of taking your soul away.
Yeah. Somewhere within there, it's as if I became aware of that. Now, I saw these people in the hospital, and they really, it was always against me. It was always negative, for the most part, just purely negative, and causing this deep anxiety. And it was almost a separate thing. And I can't actually recall at what point I saw this, but I became aware of that there are souls that their whole purpose is to trick somebody, or to put somebody into their own, that same position as them, and that they found excitement in that. And what I viewed was that they were just laughing and waiting for something to happen.
Wow. And even the hospital staff was pretty negative about your chances of survival. They gave you, 5% chance of living?
Right. Yep. A hospitalist after the fact had told us that. Now, hospital staff was really great to us, but there was, as they communicated to my wife, there was no promises. There was no, it was weeks into it before they gave any kind of positive indication to my wife. They were really careful with their language, because they thought we weren't going to make it. And I did have some nurses after the fact come up to me and say, "Oh, we were so worried about your children." And I said, "You weren't worried about me?" And they said, well, and one in particular said, "We thought we knew what was going to happen to you."
Wow. That's brutally honest. Well, your wife, Amy, prayed, I understand, that you would see your two deceased children.
Correct. She did. She understood how it may be for me. COVID protocols kept family from being there in the hospital, and I was terribly confused. And because of that, because of the horror with that, that was kind of her hope, is that my two children could be there with me to comfort me. Mm-hmm. Now, elsewhere in my family, they kind of worried about that. They worried that I'd give up. There was a real sense that, and maybe it's my man colds over the years, the way I've reacted to little things, but my family really worried that there was a chance that I would give up. Yeah.
Of course, you had four little babies at home that you needed to come back to as well. But I would think, given the amount of time and care that your first two children needed, that you had bonded really deeply with them.
Yeah. I mean, it was, people sometimes think that when that disabled children are just totally hard to deal with. And that really wasn't the case for us. We always had somebody to hold. I could read a book or do whatever, watch a show, and I could just hold these children. Just always had them close. And they couldn't run away. When I needed somebody there, I could always keep them there and just enjoy their company.
So tell us, once you'd passed through this realm of angry souls, what you then witnessed.
Yeah. So, just had this constant darkness, constant anxiety. And then I was just there. I was just in a different place. And this place was beautiful. I just had, it's as if every bad feeling was just ripped away from me. Every anxious feeling, and I've always got some anxious feeling, but every anxious feeling, every worry, every impatience was just taken from me, and everything was lighter. And also I was suddenly not in pain anymore. And that kind of shocked me, except that this place, it felt like something had connected. It felt like I was home, that this connection had been bridged and I was home. But this place was just beautiful. There was, it's as if I was just at the very end of a building, and this building had, I don't even want to say constructed, it had been made out of pearl, almost formed out of pearl, not a bunch of little pearls, but the pearl element. And it just lit up beautifully, but there weren't lights. It's just that things glowed, and everything was light. And the building opened up to an external landscape, and in that external landscape, it was just beautiful. There was just a landscape that ended in a haze that kind of went off into the sky. It felt like from that end that we were on an island in the sky. Now, on the other end, it's as if the building tightened up as it came closer, as if it was in a tunnel. But I will say this: it didn't feel. I never felt as if I was traveling through a tunnel. At least I don't recall anything along those lines. But the building almost seemed to turn into a tunnel at the other end.
And I think you said it opened up similarly to the Sydney Opera House in Australia.
Right. Yeah. Just a wide opening to the outside with just an open face. But yeah, that's the closest thing I could compare it to.
What did you see outside where it opened to a view?
I wish I could describe that perfectly. I saw there were on the ground there was writing, and I'm gonna give a disclaimer here because this takes away from it. But there were circular designs, almost as if you'd see on a basketball court. And now I'm going to take that back, right? Because this was something. There was something beautiful about it. It was not a basketball court, but I did see circular designs on the ground. But just on the outside, things were so clean that on one hand, I thought, this isn't real. But on the other hand, I thought, I've never seen something so real in my life. This is reality.
And I think you compared it to virtual reality in a way because it was so perfect.
Exactly. Yeah. My soul, my consciousness couldn't comprehend what it was and why it was so perfect. I smelled flowers, but I didn't see flowers. I felt this wonderful feeling while I was there. And that's kind of how my consciousness explained it. Now, I do think there was a reason for that, and I can get into that later. But even though I was in this fear, when I was in the hospital, I was in such fear that I was going to die a slow death. And I was preparing myself for that death. As I was here, it's almost as if the possibility of what this place was had been removed from my mind. And so the only explanation was that this was some sort of virtual reality.
And yet it felt like home to you too.
It did.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I may have this wrong, but I believe in the Mormon tradition, families collect in one place. The Bible, Jesus said, in my Father's house, there are many rooms or many mansions. that in the Mormon tradition, there is a place where the whole family gets together, or you have I've heard it described as a planet where you have your family. Did you have a feeling about this space like that?
Yeah. Now, this space didn't. It's hard to call it a planet. But it felt like a little island in the sky. And yet that was one thing that occurred to me. And keep in mind, I didn't even consider that this was the spirit world. I didn't consider that this was heaven. And yet the thing that occurred to me was that the connection happened, and this is our place. This is where we meet. But now, and I'll get into this later as well, but the we was also the question. Who is we in this situation? But it's very much conveyed to me. And when these things were conveyed, there was very little conveyed to me, but when they were conveyed to me, it was as if truth had just, I don't even know how to explain it, but there was no doubting those few things that were conveyed to me.
And was it on this first occasion that you were there that you saw these two, or you saw a beautiful woman and the presence of someone else as well?
Yeah. So I didn't even see the presence of the man. It's hard to explain how I knew that he was there. I knew the presence was there, but I don't recall necessarily seeing that presence. I did see the woman. I saw this just beautiful woman, and I did understand that there was a connection to them. I understood that there was a love, and that she loved us. She took care of our family, and particularly my children.
And how did she appear? Were you there alone at first, or was she there from the time you arrived?
I was alone at first. I remember looking at the place and taking it in, but I also, it feels like I knew somebody was coming. Mm. And I don't know how long I was there. I just knew that I was happy to be there. I was happy to wait. I was happy. And that's not me. I'm not a happy to wait person. Yeah. And yet those ideas, it's not, some people say they don't feel time, and I didn't necessarily feel a lack of time. Maybe I did, but what really strikes me is that I felt there was no rush. There was nothing other than whatever was going to happen that I needed to worry about. And I felt very relaxed, and I don't really know how long I waited, but there was time that I was just there alone, breathing it in and feeling it. And there was also time when I expected their arrival, but then they did arrive.
And did you feel like it was their place? I think at some point she told you that she'd put a lot of work into it. Was that what she meant by that? So I knew that there were a few things. I knew that she had put a lot of work into me, and into my healing, and that kind of came later. I see.
But it felt like our place, the place where we meet. It wasn't necessarily any other place. And this, I think it's worth pointing out that as beautiful as this was, it didn't necessarily feel like this was the highest of high places. It just felt like our place. And it felt like it had connected. Now, what she did explain to me was, and a lot of this wasn't even explained, it was just as if it was downloaded, that this woman cares for my family. She takes care of us. And I just knew these things. I knew that she had, what I did understand was that she put a lot of effort into my children. And so as this was becoming clear to me, I thought in my mind that I should ask what her name is. And then I kind of stepped back in my thoughts and I said, I know who this is. would be really embarrassing for me to ask that question. I know who she is. She's obviously taking care of my kids. And when it was explained to me that she had taken care of my kids, it's as if that memory was downloaded to me. Now, I didn't see specific memories. I didn't see that, she was there when my kid was in a wagon this day or anything like that. I didn't see specific memories, but it became part of me that, yes, she has been there. She's taking care of the kids. And that was one of those other things just given to me that was undeniable. So even though in my mind I didn't know her name, it felt like I didn't remember her name. I knew these things about them. And so it felt like it would have been really embarrassing to ask them their names. And then even this man, as I knew his presence was there, I didn't feel an urgency to have him come face to face with me. I didn't have an urgency to see his face because this felt so much like our place to come together that I kind of just felt like, oh, I'll be back. I'll be right back.
And how long did it feel like you were there before you had to return to the hospital?
That's a tricky question because I felt like I was there about a day. That first time I felt like I was there about a day, but the really weird feeling was coming back into the hospital and knowing that when I really came to, that it had been about a week and a half. And yet feeling like I had been gone for months. So I do not remember months worth of memories or experiences. I remember what felt like a day, not a day and a night, just about a day being there. And it was so relaxed, and just a beautiful feeling of love there, but it felt like a day.
Do you remember much communication between the two of you?
There was always the downloads, and she was very patient with me. And this all felt very appropriate, but I just watched her. I just admired her beauty and just watched her walk around. And there was just love flowing from her, love flowing from me. And I just felt like she was patient with me. She allowed me to do nothing at all and just kind of soak it in. But there was some communication. I don't specifically recall her opening her mouth and talking as we do, but I do remember her voice. I definitely remember her voice, and it's one of the most special things that I hold. Of all memories, it's one of the most special things to have that voice, and I can recall that at any time, and it's kind of like my whoopee. Little kids have their blanket, and for me as an adult, that's the one thing that I cling on to is hearing that voice.
Wow. So then you're back in the hospital, and all the negative feelings return, even to the point of wishing that you would die. I understand.
Yeah. And I came back, same negative feeling, same, hearing voices of, you're going to die, and 2 out of 3 chance you're going to die. But and there was a greater chance that I was going to die, but these voices were cheering on my death. And so back in the hospital, it was just, once again, it was terrifying. I was experiencing this throbbing pain in my leg. And then the real panic that I had in the hospital was being there and having the ventilator tube in my mouth. Because when I was slightly aware, there was rarely anybody in the hospital room. And that's not an indication of the hospital staff. That's more of an indication that this was the peak of COVID, and the hospitals were overrun. So there weren't people there to say, hey, you're going to be okay. Hey, this is all right. The nurses were running around. They were run ragged. But to have this thing in my mouth, and they didn't know that I didn't understand what it was, but I had a little thing. It was the ventilator, right? And it was a tube down to my lungs, and it was breathing for me. But I also had an oxygen mask over that. And I thought, this dang thing is in the way of my oxygen mask. I can't breathe. And I could, the amount of air that was really filling my lungs was so minimal because my lungs were in such bad shape. But I felt like somebody was out to get me, in addition to hearing voices and seeing some of these things.
Wow. And I understand you were thrashing around sometimes violently.
Yeah.
You said something about leaving deep tissue scars on your face.
Yeah, I've got a good scar here. It looked a little more macho at the time, but it really stretched across my face, and it was more just trying to prop that oxygen mask on my face. At one point it fell off, and I tried as hard as I could to get it back on, not realizing that there was a machine breathing for me. I was so dependent on that oxygen mask and just didn't really understand.
And they had your hands tied down too, didn't they?
Yeah.
Oh, what a nightmare.
Yeah.
But then you were back again in the beautiful place.
Yeah. So, those thoughts were all through my head again. And I just thought, rather than being tortured and killed, I just need to die. And there was nothing I could do. My hands were tied down. That was, as terrifying as it sounds, that I think they understood that we can act erratically. And so there was nothing that I could do, but I thought, I need to die. I need to find a way to die. And I fought for it, fought to die rather than be tortured and then die. And once again, I found myself in this place. And this time there was a little more direct communication. And it started slow. Once again, there was no pressure. There was no pressure to talk quickly. And my mind had become totally separated from the hospital. It wasn't even a consideration. There was the initial feeling of, oh, I'm not in pain anymore. And then I couldn't even consider the hospital because I was so much focused on just how beautiful this place is. And frankly, I don't think I could even comprehend those same stresses anymore in this place. But I saw her again. I walked with her again. There were things communicated to me, and this at this point she looked at me, and she was very direct with me, very direct and loving. And I would say this: there was one point where she laughed at me, and it was as if a mother had, as if your child had said something silly, misunderstood a word or something like that. But she laughed at me. I think she could see the confusion. She knew that I wasn't fully allowed to comprehend where I was or anything along those lines. But she laughed at me, and I took no offense. I could see the purity in her laugh. I could understand that I did something silly, but I didn't. If that were to happen here, I'd be offended. I would be very bothered to be laughed at. And yet I just felt the love. I saw the laugh, I heard the laugh, and I just felt love. And I didn't feel a need to get clarity on what I was misunderstanding. But we spoke, and we spent a lot of time together again. And I don't remember a lot of that, but I do remember spending time. And then she really talked to me, and she had to be a little more stern, a little more direct, I would say. And she just said, will you need to calm down. And it came into my mind, oh, I'm in the hospital. I need to calm down. She said, you need to calm down. Everything's going to be okay. That was really important for her to tell me. And I don't feel like I went immediately back to the hospital, but I felt like those were important words. And then I just felt just a tremendous love there. And the way that I explain this is that I've just never felt that love on this earth. My wife is so good. She is so kind. She's so patient with me. My kids are so good. I've just felt tremendous love in this earth, and yet I've never felt love like that. It was palpable. It was just a flowing feeling throughout my body. And that's the thing that really stood out here. But after she said that, I found myself back in the hospital again. There was some time that passed, and then I was back in the hospital. And there was still no disconnect from my mind. That I was not able to disconnect from the trouble, right? I came back to the hospital and I thought, okay, they're still trying to kill me, but she told me to be calm, and she told me everything's going to be okay. And I knew that when she told me certain things, I just knew them. And at the back of my mind now, and I'm in a more limited brain space back in the hospital, but in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I don't understand how this is going to work, but I know that she's right. And I feel some confidence in that. And so there was a little bit of calmness, but still looking at nurses, and I couldn't talk at the time, and nurses were struggling to communicate with me, and I really took it as apathy at best, and that some were still just didn't care. But as time went on, I felt okay. But it was dark enough that she needed to come to me one more time. And that last time I didn't go anywhere, but she showed me an image. Now keep in mind, as I met this woman, I was so familiar with her. I recognized her. I recognized the feeling and the care, and recognized that she cared for my family. That as I came back to the hospital, I thought, she's such a good neighbor. She's such a good neighbor to love my kids and to take care of my kids. And in the midst of my anxiety here in the hospital, I just thought, we need to take better care of her. She's given so much of her adult life to taking care of someone else's kids that I just feel guilty. We need to find her a boyfriend, and we need to make her life a little bit easier. So there were these natural ideas here on earth, but at the same time, I was trying to put the pieces together. Who is this neighbor? Where does she live? I was trying to match her here on earth with a face, because that feeling of familiarity, that feeling that she had been here for the last decade or so, really rang true for me. And finally, the darkness kind of crept in again, and I was really feeling down. Even had a point where I thought I was dead. Everything had kind of stopped, and for a moment there, I thought I was dead, and she just came to me. I wasn't in the place, but she just came to me, and she said, In fact, I don't even know that I saw her face. I saw the image and I heard her voice. And she said, we'll be together again. We will be whole. We'll be together again. And she showed me a picture of my family. And I wish I had a perfect view of this picture, because she was probably in that picture of my family. But she showed me that image and she said, we'll be whole again. And I thought, well, that's sure strange that my neighbor lumps herself so closely with the family that she would say that. But the other thing that came was kind of downloaded to me is that she had to do some sort of inner working to bring me back. That she had done these amazing things. Now, as I'm here on earth, and this very much happened as I was in the hospital, but I do think my consciousness was in a higher state as that was communicated to me. But it very much felt like, that she had put this tremendous effort into saving my life. And as I was thinking of this after the fact, I thought, oh, she did something real scientific. She figured something out. But there was also something miraculous to it. There was this miraculous science that she had done. And that of course was my earth explanation for this. But once again, as she explained that to me, I knew I would be okay. And from there, everything improved. Now, my hospital stay was rough, but I knew from that point that everything would be okay. And just knew that this woman had really figured something out, and she had figured a way out that I would live and that I would see my family again.
So you felt like she had personally participated in the healing of your body as well as in the healing of your stress.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
Did you think of her as an angel at that point, or were you still struggling to remember her name?
I was still struggling. To remember her name. And the hard thing is I just knew everything she said was true. But the next couple of weeks in the hospital, well, I was aware in the hospital for about a week and a half after that, or I don't know, about a week or so. But as I was in the hospital, I still was trying to remember who she was. And in my mind, I went through every house in the neighborhood and I matched the people who lived in those houses. And I thought, I'm in this weakened state again. And I thought, I don't know who this woman is. And there was this battle of, her words were so true. And I know something miraculous happened. And I know that there were answered prayers. I know that all these wonderful things happened. And I just couldn't deny her words, but I started to deny her in my mind because I couldn't match up who she was. I had the face so perfectly in my mind, but I couldn't match her up to what I guess I expected here. I thought there's no way anybody outside of this neighborhood could put in the time that I felt so clearly that she was putting in. And I kind of disconnected. I had conversations with my wife about this place, and I couldn't clearly communicate it, but in my mind at the time I thought, let's go back to this place, because it felt like that. It felt like this was now a place that we'd be able to go back to. And maybe it was just that the sense of time from that point was that I would be right back. Hopefully I've got a real long way to go, but as far as that concept, maybe it just felt like I would be right back. But I talked about the place, and as time went on, I just I kind of had these dark ideas in my head too, and these voices, and thought, you know what, that didn't really happen. There was nobody threatening me in the hospital. And so my mind, I allowed the idea to creep into my mind that maybe this was a hallucination too. But I felt those feelings and just knew that what she said was so true. And so it was a real struggle. And I went through the next few weeks. They took me home probably a little prematurely, except that hospital beds were so taken up. Yes. And I really struggled for the next few weeks to move, to do really basic things. And it was just my lungs, right? It was just COVID, but my whole body had been affected. And I, used a wheelchair to get around. I couldn't even push myself in the wheelchair for a couple of weeks. Could barely move around. I always needed somebody with me. But after about 3 weeks went by, I was finally able to get up the stairs with oxygen and to do some really basic things. And I finally had a day where I felt like, okay, my pain and everything was manageable. I'm going to make it through this. And I found myself 3 a.m. or whatever. And I don't really remember the exact time, but I emailed my wife at this time. She was asleep, but I wanted to tell her what thoughts I was having. But I found myself just in the bathroom connected to our bedroom and just had this overwhelming thought of, you almost died and you need to learn a lesson. And so I thought, okay, what do I need to learn? How do I need to be a better dad? What do I need to start doing? What do I need to stop doing? Is this moved into this idea of what do I need to fix in my life? And just kind of ran through some things, because I really felt this powerful feeling that I had something to learn from this. And as I went through all these fixes that I could do, those were important, but it just wasn't feeling right. And finally it hit me as if I was there again. I saw her face and relived some of these memories and even felt those same feelings. And at this point, it occurred to me that this woman had a real family resemblance. This woman looked like my mother. She looked like my wife. And she had this kind of family resemblance that now, although the face was sitting there so perfectly in my mind throughout this time, it hit me. It struck me right now at this point. And I realized this is it. This is what I was supposed to learn, not some great lifestyle change. Although I could lose some pounds and do some things that keep me out of the hospital. It occurred to me, this is what I need to learn, who this woman was. Now, there are, and if it's not painfully obvious at this point, this woman was my daughter. But just to go back onto my daughter was born with severe, she was severely deformed. When she was first born, it wasn't as apparent, but her head began to grow. She had hydrocephalus, and she had such a tiny body. Maybe got to, 15, 17 pounds by the time that she was 16 months old. And she just had a lot of veins in her head. And she was deformed enough that she was kind of the subject of mocking. We'd walk around a grocery store when we lived in Florida, and you'd always hear, "Oh, look at that baby with the big head." And we'd hear these things, and they just hurt. And to see that, to see that, Whitney, and to see the pain that we perceived was tough. It was really tough to see. And so to see this woman, this 30-year-old woman, now Whitney would not naturally have been 30. Whitney would have been naturally about 16 years old, but this 30-year-old woman was my daughter. And to see her in such perfect condition was beautiful. Now, not only was she in perfect condition, she had a family resemblance. Now, there's nothing about my family resemblance that I would call perfect, and yet it was. And so there's a real beauty in that to me, that there was still something important about our genetic view. There was still me, and there was still my wife in this beautiful, seemingly perfect being. So, it really hit me at that time that maybe my brothers, maybe my parents, anybody that doubted me, maybe they were right. I really feel like there was a reason why I was not allowed to know who this woman was. I really feel like I was not allowed to comprehend what this place was. As much as I wanted to die, when I arrived in this place, I couldn't consider that this was heaven or that this was the spirit world. And yet I felt the beauty, and I understood the beauty, and I understood the connection and the truthfulness. Now, I want to go back to the man there. I saw this man there, and he was there. I knew he was there, and I don't even know how I can explain this, except that I sensed that he was there. There was I don't recall a shadow or anything along those lines. But my Vincent was a little different from Whitney. He grew to be 8 years old, and he did have some of the same deformities, but not on as big of a scale. And the thing about Vincent is he grew to be old enough that had I seen Vincent, had I been granted the chance to see Vincent, I might have understood who he was. And as my siblings thought, I might have gone in their direction. To have children that you miss so badly, and then to be in their presence is, just amazing. Even though I recognized so many beautiful things, the really amazing part came after I thought back and realized that family connection, that those familiar genetic views of my daughter, and that was really special for me. And I really do think there would have been a real pull. I think there is anyway. A lot of times there's the pull to be in this just beautiful, peaceful place. But had I understood who they were, I think the pull would have been just so strong, maybe too strong.
That you would have stayed there.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to admit. Because I do, I have these obligations, and I just have just a beautiful family. I'm so happy with them, and I'm so proud of them. But I think that is the beauty of this place is that some of these cares and some of these, and in my case, it was so exaggerated, the anxieties and the worries. It was so huge. And then to be in this place that was the opposite, I think it's easy to see that. And I think it's just kind of a testament of what's out there, of what awaits us in the next life, how beautiful that is.
So you think because Vincent had reached the age of 8, that if you'd seen his face, you would have known that these were your children, and that's why he stayed in the shadow?
I think so. I think so. I can't think of any other reason why I wouldn't have seen his face, but Vincent grew to be big enough that I see, I'll see another child sleeping and I see Vincent's face. And, had I seen a 30-year-old version of Vincent, I probably would have recognized that. Now Whitney was just so skinny, so tiny that I don't think that was necessarily the case at the moment. And even when I saw her, I didn't necessarily recognize her as Whitney. When I really put that picture out there, I recognized her as family, and that love, that feeling of love, confirmed to me who that was.
Well, you had taken such care of those kids, you and Amy, that I guess they felt it was the least they could do to restore you to health. On a supernatural level, that's the way families should always work. That's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
And, just also wonderful that, because Amy and I have always felt as if we have had three families. We had Whitney, she passed. We had Vincent, and then we had the twins, but then Vincent passed. And then we had the first twins and the second twins. And so it's always felt like three families, and Amy's always been there and I've always been there. It's kind of a horrifying feeling to worry that something may happen to one of us because of that. Nobody else understands that feeling of three families. And yet I really feel like that bridge has been gapped. That gap has been bridged because I just have this understanding that she knows her siblings. She's been here. She loves them. Even though, I don't have pictures of them together. She had passed before they were born.
But she's with them when she wants to be.
Yeah.
When you told Amy, was she jealous of this encounter that you'd had?
Amy's just sweet. She's just so sweet, and she just understood right away. I'm not the type of guy who I just don't talk about these things all the time, and she may think that I don't care or whatever. And as I sent her that email, I was just in the other room writing her an email. I wrote the email to my mother I was just realizing that I was looking into the eyes of somebody who looked just like my mom and just like my wife, just a perfect morph of the two. And I felt a real need to send them an email. And so my wife, actually, what she did is she grabbed her journal right then and she showed me her journal and she said, this is the day that I prayed that you would see our babies. Oh. And she wrote in the journal, even saying, I felt as if you had seen our babies. And then, the next 3 weeks as you recovered, I was really disappointed that there was nothing for you to say. And in those next 3 weeks, I was the first week and a half, every night I was waking up 7 or 8 times just in a panic, still not fully able to breathe. And so for her, that was kind of tough to say, because she documented it that day. She said, I really feel like they are close to Travis. And then for her, it was more of an, I told you so. Not that she had told me, but she had it there documented that she had not only prayed about it, but that she had felt that I was going to be all right for that reason, for the reason of them being there.
Once you figured out these folks were that you visited, do you feel that there were other long-term benefits or goals in your life now that you didn't have before?
Absolutely. I've put a lot of time into studying the near-death experiences of others. They're special to me. And the things that are special, for example, I read one the other day where a man talked about, I think he had talked about seeing his miscarried son. And he remembered that voice. And the way he described it, I thought, he gets it. He gets it. That's something so special. And I read these stories and they're special to me. Now, I used to think it was cool when somebody would have a near-death experience and they could say, hey, I was floating in the hospital room and I saw you go into the next room and scratch your head with a pin. They could verify things, and somebody says, oh, that did happen. Those things were kind of neat to me. But to me now, it's just, there are things to me that feel proven. And they feel proven because only somebody who has had those kind of experiences would explain something in the way that they did. So I think there's something special. There's something to look forward to. And for me, the real life-changing thing is just a view of others that, I got a rough view of the world, but just the idea that people are loved and we get to make mistakes and we still get to be loved. And there's just something so fantastic that awaits us.
Well, Travis, we are out of time. I want to thank you so much for sharing this with our audience. Amazing experiences and very personal. And so it's good of you to be so open about it. And it's going to help a lot of people who've lost children, I know. If listeners have any questions, is there some way they could get in touch with you? Or one thing they can do, I will say, is to leave comments for you where this show appears on our YouTube channel at NDE Radio with Lee Witting. But if you have some other way they could reach out to you,
I could leave an email address in the show notes or something along those lines. But I would be more than happy to find those comments and just answer back anybody that has questions. And I hope that is a thing. I hope that those who have lost children can find some sort of comfort in knowing that not only are they there, they're still here.
Yes. They're here and they're there. And they're like our angels in many ways.
No?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks again. If listeners would like to hear this show again or any of our more than 450 archived ad-free NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE Radio site and hit the Past Shows button, or go to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting, where you can subscribe to and comment on the complete NDE Radio library. And be sure to check out our NDE Radio Facebook page. Just search NDE Radio with Lee Witting on your Facebook app. And listen again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern at TalkZone for more NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying thanks for listening.